Okay, flowering plants can also have really cool adaptations that are not just in their flowers. So Venus flytraps are a well-known flowering plant. These are native to the East Coast, and they grow in swamps where there is low nitrogen. So they trap insects to get nitrogen. For what kinds of molecules do we need nitrogen for? Do you remember from our earlier units? We talked about proteins and DNA, two crucial molecules for life. And so these live in swamps, and swamps tend to be low in that nutrient. And so this is one way that they can do that, is to trap these insects. And you've probably all seen images of Venus flytraps when a little bug kind of lands on and triggers these a few little hairs that are inside that trap. The trap kind of closes up, and it has these little hairs, bristles that keep the insects from crawling out. So those are the stuff of movies, and it's really fun to watch. But we also have one in California called the California pitcher plant. Now, it doesn't close up like a Venus flytrap, but it does have lots of little hairs inside its pitcher plant. So it looks something like this from the inside. And this will be like a little sort of a cross section of it. Inside this plant are all these little hairs, actually, that go this way. So an insect comes in, lands in a little sort of puddle at the bottom, and cannot crawl back out. So the insects get trapped, and then they basically sort of dissolve and provide the plant with nutrients. And you can see these are green, so they still photosynthesize as well as trapping insects. So they get their glucose from photosynthesis, but they get their nitrogen for their DNA and their proteins by trapping insects. So very cool plant. You'll see these in places like swamps in the Sierras and the Klamath. Swamps in Sierras. So we tend to see them in the mountains and in the Klamath Mountains. I've seen many fields of California pitcher plant, and they have a beautiful flower, but this is a leaf adaptation that forms the pitcher. We also have, very locally to us, vernal pool plant communities that are in bloom as we speak right now. This is late April, and these pools exist because of a hard pan soil. Hard pan soil prevents, what is that word when water seeps down into the soil? Do you remember? Prevents percolation of water. So, so the water really only evaporates. Water only kind of leaves the pool by evaporation. And so you get these really cool fairy rings of flowers, and yellow and white and purple down at the bottom. This is water right now in this pool. It hasn't fully evaporated. And not just do we have really cool flowers, but insects and other invertebrates are highly specialized to live in these pools that dry out, sort of like the brine shrimp. So we have tadpole shrimp and fairy shrimp, insects and other inverts are also highly adapted to these pools. So if you are looking for a good place to do your field project, this is one excellent place. One really local one is called Mather Field. Mather Field Vernal Pools. If you look that up, you will find how to get there. It's just on Zinfandel Road, a really wonderful place to go and visit with your kids and take little strolls out and among these flowers. Another plant adaptation that's really cool, this is a plant that grows in California more towards the coast. This is called knobcone pine, and this pine cone will only release its seeds, remember this is a female pine cone, the pine cones of knobcone pine, and there's several other species that are the same way. The pine cones will only release seeds in a fire. So they're very much fire adapted. And so the heat of the fire causes the cone to open up and release its seeds, and then the seeds have this nutrient-rich soil because the fire has swept through. They don't have competition very much because a lot of the other plants have been killed by the fire. And so you get these forests of knobcone pine. They usually only live about 80 years. Not a very long-lived pine, but these stands of knobcone pine are really good kind of transitional species for new forests to grow. Another major species or community of plants that we have in California are the chaparral plants, and these grow in the foothills. You'll find chaparral communities in the foothills, in the coast ranges, kind of in a ring really around California. These are fire-adapted communities, and what they do is they grow back from their roots after a fire. They grow back from the roots after a fire. And remember that even with the hottest fires that sweep through, the soil, a few inches underneath the ground in the soil, is actually often fairly cool still, even with these fires that sweep through chaparral communities. And so these plants then that can grow back from their roots right after a fire get kind of a head start compared to plants that have to spread new seed. And so this is vegetative growth, clonal growth. They're just reproducing asexually. Some of the plants that you'll see if you go through hikes in chaparral areas, and by the way, these hikes could be like in the Coast Range, like Stebbins Cold Canyon, outside of Winters area, Woodland area. If you go up to Placerville, there's some hikes up there, or Cameron Park, or up Highway 80. Places like Auburn have a lot of really good chaparral stands. And what I'd love for you to look for if you go up there are some of the plants that we learned about in our our species list. So manzanita is a major chaparral plant, and so is redbud. If you go in the spring, which is the best time to go hiking in chaparral, because it's, these places are hot and dry, right? So you don't really want to go for a chaparral hike in the summer. So go in the spring, look for the pink redbud flowers. You might already be seeing the fruits of the manzanita, the little apple fruits. And also, if you see pine trees in there, dotted in among the chaparral, you're probably looking at the gray pine. So that concludes our series of plant evolution lectures.